Welcome back to Speakeasy. I am still Paul F. Tompkins. My guest today is... nope, do not look into my camera. Many guests make this mistake. This camera is mine. That camera is yours. Everyone has their cameras. My guest today is a stand-up comedian. He is an actor. He's an actor-comedian. He has his own show that is just premiered on Comedy Central called The Kroll Show. Please say hello to Nick Kroll. Nick, hello.
Hello, Paul.
Yes, let's not look at each other. We'll only look at our respective cameras.
Right?
Right down the barrel. Welcome to Right Down the Barrel. My guest is Nick Kroll. The Kroll Show or just Kroll Show?
Just Kroll Show.
Just Kroll Show.
But assuming that everyone will call it The Kroll Show. Now, the original title
was
The Nick Show Kroll.
Nick Show Kroll. Which you liked a lot.
I loved it.
And then who talked you out of that?
Everybody. Specifically, Comedy Central came on set one day and they were like, so, show's going great, we're super happy, but we sent out the press release about the show and everybody wrote back saying that they had a typo. And then I looked at my two executive producers. I was like, guys, come on now, right? Nick Show Kroll? And they were like, no. And they didn't care at all. And then I was pushing hard for the Krollsby Show. That was the next option.
Oh.
And they did not want that.
Oh.
And then it was one of our editors who said to us, let the show be funny and don't worry about making jokes out of the title.
It is tough though. When you have an idea that delights you, it is tough to let it go.
And I've had almost no idea that delighted more comedians than the Nick Show Kroll.
Do you know why, Nick?
Why?
They wanted you to fail.
Really?
Yes. The show is a sketch show.
Yes.
It is character driven. You
Yes.
do a lot of characters. This is a very common theme to your characters.
Mm-hmm.
People who take themselves very seriously.
Yes.
Ridiculous idiots who are very self-absorbed and assume that the rest of the world thinks they are great.
I don't think I realized until the last about year that that's what almost all my characters do, which I've now, and realizing that there's a formula here probably means I need to change that a little bit.
Well, it means you probably will.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because now you're conscious of it and you'll probably go into
Yes,
that
but
direction.
it is, I think what I realized at some point, I was like, I find unself-aware people hilarious.
Yeah.
People who lack a concept of how they're viewed. And I think the funniest version of that is people who think of themselves as incredibly important. Like John Mulaney at one point said to me, he was like, a lot of your characters exclaim that they are important.
Like literally say it.
Yes, it's a common
I'm
theme.
very
I'm
important.
very important. I don't know why comedically I think it's funny, but I seem to find that interesting.
If you're at a club and you see a guy like Bobby Bottle Service or something like that, this is a guy who thinks he is the epitome of cool and everything he is doing is right. The way he looks, the way he talks, what he is doing.
Yes.
Is absolutely convinced, like, I am the height of what a person is supposed to be.
Yes.
I'm doing all the things that you're supposed to do, but you can look at that person. If that's not the world you're into, you look at that guy, and he's like a ridiculous cartoon.
Yes.
And it points up just how ridiculous everyone is.
Yeah.
And how ridiculous fashion is. Just the idea of trying to be cool and thinking of yourself as cool. Is how conscious are you of that kind of thing?
Something like Bobby was developed, the idea of talking about these characters as if they're Shakespearean, and they are. The canon is there.
Don't get it twisted.
Okay.
These things are Shakespearean in nature.
Okay, they are more Marlowe-esque, let's be honest, right? Is that what his name is?
Maybe a Bacon?
Yeah, exactly. Sir Francis B?
Sure.
Okay, great.
You know me.
Oh.
But we know a lot of people who do characters, and a lot of times you will do characters that are older than you are.
Yeah.
And it's always a strange thing when you begin to approach the age of the person.
Yeah, and that's what's happened. It's like, because it always stuck, it was like, me and John Mulaney are these two middle-aged divorcees who are obsessed with Alan Alda. But I'm like...
And this started when you were, what, in your 20s?
Yes, yeah, in New York. I mean, John Mulaney is a Irish kid from Chicago, and I think is most comfortable as like a 68-year-old Jewish man from New York.
Yeah.
Like that is where he is in his sweet spot.
Absolutely.
And so I think we just saw these two guys buying Alan Alda's autobiography one day and Never Have Your Dog Stuff, which I've read twice, and I genuinely love. But those guys are a perfect example of like, they're liberal because they're New York, but they're also racist. Like if they get on the subway and there's a black kid, they're gonna like clutch their PBS tote bag a little tighter.
Right.
And so I think there's something to the hypocrisy of those kinds of people who think that their worldview is enlightened or that they have a great sense of things, and then just the meekest observation of them shows that to be false.
Were you a lover of comedy when you were a kid?
I watched a lot of Mel Brooks. Like The Producers has been my favorite movie since I was probably like 13. Top Secret we owned, great film.
Very underrated movie.
It is.
There's a lot of funny stuff in
I
it.
rewatched it recently. There is a bit in that movie every 6 seconds. Like they like literally had a stopwatch to be like, no, there's not a guy with a magnifying glass over his eye and then he pulls the glass away and his eye is actually that big.
Right.
Like it's amazing. So I watched a lot of that. Yeah, I watched a lot of comedy and then at some point I never had cable. Like I've never really seen The State. Mm-hmm. I've never really seen Mr. Show.
It's fine to
say.
say.
So sorry.
That's fine.
I'm so sorry.
As long as you are honest with me, that's all I care about, Nick.
Okay. I have never watched this thing that we're doing here.
You've watched a couple.
I've watched a couple. But just to see if I was mentioned.
And after 2, no mentions.
Yeah, I was out.
Fuck.
I was out. No, but I mean, I grew up very much a comedy fan. I've watched a lot of stuff, but I didn't know growing up that I could be a comedian. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. That it was a thing that you enjoyed, but you wouldn't know the mechanics of how to go about
exactly.
doing it.
Like I'm blown away by the kids who are like, yeah, well, I went to Emerson because I wanted to do comedy writing, and I'd read that Dennis Leary went to Emerson, or because all of our peers, comedic heroes, Dennis Leary. Now you, before getting into comedy, you were a cop.
I was a cop.
Yeah.
In New York City. That's
really?
Right. Yeah.
The hit place.
Walked a beat. Then I became a detective.
Then you walked away from it all?
I walked away from it all.
Did you lose your partner?
I lost my partner. Mm-hmm. And the city didn't make sense to me anymore. Mm-hmm. You know, Nick, there was a time when you knew everybody's name.
Sure. No, I get it. So you left there and you went and hit the Philly open mic circuit?
Listen, you're not going to turn this around.
Okay.
Because we're getting into your life.
Okay, sorry. I'm happy to talk about my life.
Oh, are you?
I will never walk away from it.
Are you really?
Yes.
Okay, let's get into this.
So, but I similarly didn't know that one could be I knew that I grew up watching Saturday Night Live. I knew that those guys and women had become actors, sketch comedian, whatever. I knew it. I understood it. But even until I got to college, and I'd done a few shows in high school and stuff like that, but I got to college and joined the improv group in college. Mike Birbiglia and I did this funniest act on campus our freshman year. And
was that the name of it?
It was called the funniest act on campus. It was like a contest. And the winner got a 5-minute...
Okay. I thought you guys had named yourselves
that's kind of
the funniest act on campus.
That's kind of an amazing name for a show or a college group. The winner got a 5-minute spot at the DC Improv, which sort of jump-started his career doing stand-up in clubs. And I did it, my whole bit was, and I've told this on stage, but I said I was going to pee my pants. And then I couldn't pee my pants.
Yes, I've heard
so, but Mike saw it and was like, "Oh, you're funny. You should audition for the sketch show we're doing at the end of the year." And I did the sketch show, and I walked in. I remember literally walking in and leaving that first rehearsal. We were just reading through a bunch of sketches, and I was like, "Oh, this is it. This is the most natural I've ever felt in any place or environment ever." And then I joined the improv group the next year, and I finished that show, and it was somewhat of a revelation. And then UCB came down and did a show at GW. Their first season of their show was about to come out, and I remember
the TV show,
and I watched them do ASCAT, and it blew my mind.
For the viewers, that's an improv show, and it's I gotta say, it's the best improv show. If you're going to see
it's a really
an improv
fun
show,
one. Yeah.
If you're interested at all in seeing one, you have to go see that show in New York, LA. It's just they have a guest monologist who takes a suggestion of a word from the audience. Then the monologist will just stream of consciousness talk about what that word makes them think of, and then the improvisers improvise scenes based on what the monologist has said. And it's the best people doing this form.
Yeah, and it was to watch it both for whatever would happen later in my career as doing both improv and stand up. It is a beautiful intersection of comedy of taking, people telling stories and observation stuff, and then people taking chunks and moments of that and then creating scenes that both relate to and don't relate to it as a jumping off point. And that I remember watching that show at GW and my mind kind of exploding. And then that became that. And then through college, I kept improvising and we would host anything like a cappella fest. It was just like, let's get on stage,
Any excuse to get on stage.
Yeah. And by the end of college, it was the first thing that I did that was like, I'll do all the menial tasks, the busy work that go into this because the means justify the ends so completely that the idea of doing like a sold out show at Bulldog Alley, at college was like this amazing. And
what was Bulldog Alley?
It was called Bulldog Alley. It was like a little like cinder block like a space that used to be a bar when people could like still drink at colleges,
right?
And like date rape each other, and then
oh, those wonderful days.
Those wonderful halcyon days, huh? So
pour some out.
I know. Yeah.
Not really though, because they're horrible people.
Yeah, and they never poured it out.
No, let's move on.
Okay.
You're doing shows.
I'm doing shows, and then I like drove around the country after my senior year of college, and I was with my girlfriend. I was like, well, maybe I'll move to San Francisco, maybe I'll move to Chicago, LA, New York, and I went and saw those cities on a road trip. And I was kind of like, well, what do I want to do? And I was like, maybe I'll do socially responsible marketing. That was like,
so you still hadn't decided?
I hadn't decided for real,
wow.
that was going to happen.
But did you feel like you knew in your heart,
yeah.
This is what I want to do?
Yeah.
There's no question. But was it that you felt like I'm not even allowed to think about doing that as a job?
Kind of. There was a part of me that was still like, people don't actually do this.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Even though I was surrounded by it, and my friends like Mike had gone to New York and were doing it, and were like getting on TV, I was still like, I don't know. And it wasn't like my parents put undue pressure on me at all.
But are your friends encouraging you at this point?
I would say that my family and friends were skeptically supportive.
I know exactly what you mean.
Like, we'll come to your show because you're doing this, and we respect that you're taking this risk, but nobody makes it.
But you feel like people are humoring you.
Yes.
And they're waiting for when you eventually say, you know what, guys?
We're done.
Yeah.
Thank you for humoring.
Finally.
Yeah. So that didn't happen. That never happened.
It clearly didn't.
It did not happen.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Can't wait to lose it.
When you were a kid, was comedy, was it a kind of coping mechanism for you? Was it a thing that, because that's a very common story for people that do what we do, that you're either, you're insecure or lonely or, whatever it is. Were you always a funny kid or were you quiet about that?
I'm the youngest of 4, and so I think inherently the babies are kind of more entertainers. They're just, I think, and also you absorb a ton of information at a much younger age. Like the oldest are these trailblazers, I think, who are like, I don't know what movies to watch. Like, there's no one there to tell them what to do and what to consume and how to act around older people.
Yeah.
Besides your parents, And so I was the youngest of 4, so I was like, okay, like my brother was showing me like Hot Dog, the movie, and like Top Secret, and things like that I absorbed at a much younger age than he did. So I was always entertaining them. And I think my family's pretty funny. Like my siblings and my parents all have a pretty good sense of humor.
Does everybody make each other laugh? Or is it hard to get a laugh in the family?
It's not that hard to get a laugh in the family. Maybe to my detriment. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, I am a goddamn genius. But then I was very short until probably like my junior year of high school. Like I entered high school at like 5 feet. So I think that being a little guy, definitely, that's the closest I had to any sort of, but I wasn't even bullied. Like, I think I'm a pretty well-adjusted, pretty happy person. And then only I think in the last couple of years in therapy, have I realized that I'm actually quite insecure and dying inside. And that has been a driving force for me, but because of nothing.
A driving force in terms of the work you do, in terms of just how you live your
all
life.
Of it. I mean, the work I do, the where the comedy comes from, and then relationships. All of that is like, oh, I'm actually probably a more insecure person than I've even thought of myself as. I believe myself to be an incredibly confident, self-assured person, very comfortable socially and things like that. And I think the decisions I've made and the not risks I've taken, but just whatever it is, I'm like, inherently I am a confident person because I also see how my other friends and comedians sort of will enter a party and be like, I gotta get out of here, whatever. And I'm like, no, let's go explore the world and let's explore, and I will enter things very clearly. So to say I'm insecure is a half of the truth.
Well, you know what? Everybody is insecure to a certain extent.
Right.
But I think the thing is, how quickly can you sort of right yourself? How quickly can you say, yeah, I'm insecure, everybody's insecure, now I can deal with this situation? Do you feel like you've become more adept at doing that, or do you feel like...
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a fair summation of it, is like what I make fun of in other people is what I try to maintain in myself, which is self-awareness.
Right.
To acknowledge the insecurity and then try to best it. You know what I mean?
So when you see somebody that just seems to be ridiculous, you're not doing it from a place of judgment of, I'm certainly not ridiculous. I'm certainly the greatest person in the world.
Right. Who knows? Because I'm on some level, what I'm saying is, this person is unself-aware, so they deserve my my ire.
Mockery and scorn.
Yeah, exactly. Because I can identify with being unself-aware, But then I've vested my own self-awareness with self-awareness. But I don't know if I believe that. I mean, I will leave this interview today and then question what I've said about my self-awareness to myself. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which makes nothing greatly enjoyable, but very, very little a complete and utter travesty.
Well, the worst thing in the world is walking around constantly thinking about yourself and how you are coming off to other people.
Yes, but I think we all are, largely, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's funny that you think that as you mature, that stuff is just going to completely go away because you're sort of led to believe that it does, but it's not true.
No, when you see how small old people are.
Yeah. They've just been squashed down by self-consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a crazy thing. It's like crazy to look at your family or friends and see adults making incredibly childlike decisions.
Oh, yeah.
And then getting yourself and be like, wow, what did I just do? How did I manage to completely mock that person and then do basically the same thing?
Right. You did this show on ABC that was based on the Geico Caveman commercials, which people were against it before I think even a single frame of the show was shot. I can't imagine what that whole journey must have been like.
So I came out to LA. This is the first year I'd come out for pilot season. I was living at the Oakwoods on Barham.
Yes, the Oakwoods is a place where people, it's just there for people to settle in for auditions.
Yes.
There's people that come out to Los Angeles to audition for TV shows. They will stay at this apartment complex, and it's a chain of apartment complexes all over the place.
But the one on Barham is like the centerpiece of it.
That is the Oakwoods as far as I'm concerned. That's the one where the wildfires always start.
Yes.
Because they're not really wildfires. It's creepy
like,
kid actors that are playing with matches that start fires every day.
So there's an amazing documentary called The Hollywood Complex, which I highly recommend, which is about all the child actors who live there with their parents, and it's a very sad, bizarre place. So I was renting subletting an apartment from a comedian who had bought his Oakwoods apartment, which is the craziest thing ever. It's just the weirdest thing ever to go buy to live year round. Well, he's a cruise ship comedian, and I hated him. He was a real jerk. It's one of those places that when the doors close, they lock automatically, and so I kept locking myself out. But I was there illegally, so I couldn't go to the front desk. But can I have another set of keys? So I would go out to Barham and have to climb up the patio and covered in like soot, like traffic soot, and I'd climb upstairs and get in through the thing. And after like the third time I did that, by the way, I never blamed myself for locking myself out. It was always this cruise ship comedian.
Absolutely. How could it not be?
I then watched his demo, his his stand-up tape that he sent out, and it was still on VHS, and it was, he did Ace Ventura in his act. So I felt okay about all of it. So I came out here to audition for pilot season because I was like, I got to be in LA. I got to be in the mix.
You had heard about this mix?
Yeah.
And you were like, that's for me.
I want to be in the mix. Because I've seen the mix and I've been around it, but now I want to be inside of it. So I went, and then I guess really the last audition I had was for Cavemen. Now the commercials, the Geico commercials are universally loved and thought of as like some of the best pieces of like art in the last 10 years.
Absolutely.
Because they're amazingly done.
Yeah.
So it was the same directors and writer of the spots who were behind the show. And I read the script, and it was one of the funniest scripts I read. And the character name was Nick, and he was a droll asshole. And I was like, I think I can handle this. And I went in, and I had the first audition, and I know this went well. And then I went in, and the callback, or the third, I don't know what it was a makeup test.
Which is how long of a process?
By the time we got to the show, it was about a 4-hour process every morning.
For the audition, how long?
Probably 2.5, 3 hours. So when I booked it, I'd never been on a TV show or a movie ever. So like I'd been in commercials, but so I booked a TV show on a network, so that was a big deal. And again, I thought it was funny. And then we went and shot the pilot, and the pilot was well over a 90-hour week. And the makeup tore my face apart. Right. Like I have very sensitive skin.
You're a sensitive person.
I'm a sensitive person, and it is exuded through the eczema that lives on my fingers and face. So, ladies, my face fell off. My face literally, like people were like, "Oh, you're fine," and then I saw my friends like over the weekend, and we shot a couple more days, and then they saw me after that, and they were like, "Oh my God, your skin looks so much better." Like they didn't say it to me while it was going on, but my face was falling off. So we shot the pilot, which was so hard. But again, the best time to have the hardest job you'll ever have because you don't have anything to base it off of.
Right.
Because I didn't know that you don't shoot like literally a 94-hour week.
So this is your first big
This
job.
is my first job ever, and I was living at the Universal Sheraton, and I was driving to Woodland Hills, which is like 50 minutes traffic, no traffic. I mean, we're talking at like getting up at 3:30 in the morning to get there at 4:15 to get into makeup for 4 hours, to then get on set at 8:15, and then shoot a like 13, 14-hour day, and then take the makeup off, and then drive home at like midnight, just like dead and on my face on fire. So we shot the pilot. It gets picked up, but so there was a couple things that received people's ire. One was that they didn't hire any of the cavemen from the commercials. Now, the truth is the lead caveman, the original caveman, is this guy John Lair, who had that show 10 Items or Less, which he was in production on.
Yeah.
So he couldn't be on the show.
Right.
He had another TV show, but there was ire for that. Then we come out, we finish the pilot, we go to the upfronts, and the TCAs, which is like 200 critics. They're exhausted, they're bored, and they pepper you with boring questions, and you say your stupid thing, and then you leave. So we're in the green room getting ready, and ABC is prepping us for all the Geico commercials. We're not connected to Geico. We have their blessing, but it's not about, and that was what we were prepped for, was the corporate tie-in of this show.
Right.
We get up to do the TCAs, and every question is about how our show is racist.
I forgot about that.
So it all became about.
I forgot about how people thought it was racist.
So, and it was to me, this whole, here's the thing, is what I'll say, is that I would not trade that opportunity and show for an iota, because one, you learn how to act. You learn how to deal with lighting. You learn how to deal with cameras. You learn how to deal with prima donnas. You learn how to deal with, like, I need to, if I want to improvise a line, I need to go run it by the writer.
Right.
The director on a TV show is sometimes answering to the writer. The boom guy is telling me I can't say that line yet. Sometimes I need to listen to him, I don't need to. You know, there are all these lessons that just...
And lessons that you're learning under the craziest possible circumstances, like physically uncomfortable.
Yes.
You know.
We could only eat cylindrical food. Like wrapped up pieces of turkey or cheese, or egg rolls were good. Moroccan cigars were not a bad thing to eat.
Sure, they're not delicious.
Yeah,
but they're the right
But they're
shape.
literally, because I couldn't, if I opened my mouth anymore, because the mask was this. It was from the top of the lip down and around the whole face, cut out around the eyes. And then the worst part for me was the soul patch. This little piece of hair, because it was all about mesh wiring. Right. And right here, I got these big fatties. And so you deal with the curl, and they would come up all day. So there's constantly a guy with a stick, like pouring glue into my face.
Did all the cavemen have the soul patch?
I don't know. Good question. I did, because I was the intellectual caveman, of course. So we get nailed for being racist. And it was a fascinating story because the press, it was amazing to watch the press jump on itself to create its own story. So where they're like, so this is all black people. This is an analogy for black people. It's like, well, no, it's all racist. Cavemen are a metaphor for all of the minorities in the U.S. And they said, well, then why are they good at sports in the pilot? And I was like, what are they? I was like, what do you mean?
Wait,
they're
we're
like,
the racists?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, one guy is really good at horseshoes. And I was like, sport. I don't know if that's a sport, by the way. And then also...
One guy collects baseball cards.
Yeah, exactly. So he's great at sports. So I was like, well, I'm the one who's throwing horseshoes, and I lose at horseshoes. So I'm not that good. And he's like, oh, okay. The next day in reading it, it was like, Cavemen is racist because they're good at sports. Like, they had just... They built their story upon themselves.
Right.
So then we went into production. We had our first table read the next day, and all of a sudden, scripts were changing dramatically. And we just were dealing with the onslaught and pressure and hate. Mm-hmm. Because people love the commercials. And then, but, look, here's what I will say about the show is, if you go back and watch that show, it is no worse than any network show, comedy show that doesn't become a wild success.
Yeah.
And some that did. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's pretty, there's some funny stuff in there. Is it like Cheers? Probably not. But it was pretty funny. And, the critics didn't like it. But what I always took solace in was that the public didn't either.
Nick, thank you very much for joining me here on Speakeasy.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to chat with you.
Look how much more I've drank.
I know. Well, that does it for this round of Speakeasy. Join me again when my guest will be a different person.
It's funny.
What are you doing over there?
I was doing this.
Right.
And then I was listening
And then I
to
saw you did a sort of...
Because I thought that was funny.
Oh, you had a moment of revelation.
Yeah. Aha.
An aha moment.
An aha moment. Isn't that what comedy is? It's about surprise?
It's a series of aha moments where you're surprised. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and check back every Monday to see who I interview next. And for more info about Speakeasy, visit mademan.com.